Kenya was first in the Security Council in this period, 1973-74. That was a decade. Most important is to be able to see how the charter is applied by those that really give themselves preeminence as the winners of the war. Second World War. The First World War, 1914-1918, kind of disorganized the order of things completely. If you have somebody born in Moranga, has not been to Meru or Ebu next door. What? My name is Donald Washian Kaniaru. I studied at Alliance High School, Kikuyu. I was there for 6 years. In the final year, I was a deputy school captain. And my friend Situila Amos Wako was the school captain. I was with a number of people, including the late Chief Justice Gicheru, student number 1688. And from there, we were ready for university. In those days, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania had only one university. College in Makerere, Kampala, specializing in medicine and agriculture. Agriculture, by the way, was incubated. And Nairobi itself was handling architecture and engineering and commerce. And Dar es Salaam was specializing in law. So that was the kind of structure of the university. So East Africans wanting to read law, we went to Dar es Salaam. And so we are well connected in the 3 East African countries and in those other countries that were fighting for their independence, Zambia and Southern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And we had a very distinct group of professors. I personally decided I would do what was rather unusual, what I liked, and what I thought was not available easily anywhere else. So I took public international law with the Professor Ian Brownlee of Oxford. I took civil law. It was important that besides common law, one had to be able to relate to other countries, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and South America. So I took civil law for that reason. I also did Sharia law. Of course, I did customary law. I felt I was sufficiently rounded up to move into the new world that had just opened up following independence of the Republic of Kenya. As I looked forward to joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it was important that you are able to understand the international community and be more or less equal to anyone interested in diplomacy. Kenya was first in the Security Council in this period, 1973-74. That was a decade, practically, after independence. We were very quick. we took over from the Somali Republic, which was there 71, 72. So we did that, and we were able to move forward the African decolonization process with Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, the question of Namibia later, and so on. We moved on. And you see, Security Council is, as you know, to structure 5 permanent members with the right to veto decisions and so on. And you have seen the kind of vetoed resolutions that are able to put here, the operative parts. Most important is to be able to see how the charter is applied by those that really give themselves preeminence as the winners of the war, Second World War. But then, of course, later on, we have the additional 10 now spread out for Africa, South America, Asia, 1 or 2, and Europe have also the non-permanent members and so on. And it's an eye-opener in terms of consulting the developing country parts. They must consult and be together in some of these issues. And I think you see the permanent members, they are kind of also clever over time, because you see, you would never have them putting vetoes, 2, 3 of them, because one will do. You don't need to do that, and I think that is something that they learned with time. So that you can do that, and then you may not feel as strongly, and in which case you can abstain, and that is not counted as against, which is a very sensible approach, I think, in that case. But I felt that our initial entry into the Security Council ought to be made available, so that it's a kind of foundation and development on the other parts of our participation in the Security Council. Because you see, within a decade we came in. After that, after 74, the next entry into the Security Council was in 1997, 1998. So you see, already it's over 2 decades we were not in the Security Council. Then, from 1998, the next stage was 2021, 2022. So you see already in 60 years, we have been there thrice. In 60 years. So it is, unless my other colleagues and friends decide that they would also do something, or some researcher will go into that, because 97, Ambassador Mahugo was the only one in the council. And I suspect that his time could not have been that very easy, because with the kind of the president we had, who would announce things or by the roadside and so on, it was a tricky, a very tricky situation, and so on. The next president did not have an entry into the Security Council. That is Mwai Kibaki, and the final one is during this major effort was made by Monica Juma and President Uhuru Kenyatta to get the council to Kenya into the council. whether the ambassador, or one ambassador again, was there throughout. That is Dr. Martin Kemani. So if he himself is a strong personality and intellectual in his own right, and therefore might also leave some mark. He's still in New York, so he has those possibilities. But I think it could inspire that kind of team and the people who are there. And that is what I think is engendered in this kind of way. You see, we have moved from a colonial status all the way now to practically free Africa. Because you see, Southern Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, 1980, it became independent, you see. 1994, you have South Africa kind of liberated. One of the privileges I had was to see the election of Mandela in South Africa following the collapse of the apartheid regime. That's 1948, 1990, 94. So it's something very significant development. And of course, and then also in the 90s, Namibia itself came of age. First World War, 1914, 1918, kind of disorganized the order of things completely. It was a global war, and resulting thereafter in sorting out, putting to Europe more or less finding, sharing the rest of the globe, Africa, Asia. Latin America was also invaded by the particular group, Spain, Portugal, and so on, France and Britain also in that part of the world. So order was, so to speak, the order of the day amongst those. And then you see suppressing the natives that were there, the people who were there and so on, kind of being put together, and then labeled, this is with the British, this is with whoever, and so on. But finally, it collapsed anyway. You see, you had the seat of the League of Nations in Geneva, and Geneva itself was neutral. For a long time, they were neither here nor there. They were kind of, you put things there, there will be order, sort out things from there, and so on. But the war, I think good sense prevailed in that they had to make up a new arrangement, filling in gaps that were not apparent in the League of Nations itself. And naturally, the winners had a way of saying, we will do it this way. And they are arrogated to themselves the right to determine certain things, and their interests will not be prejudiced. That's how come the veto itself comes in. And you have the five, the winners. You see, because the Russians at the time, the Chinese, the British, the French, and all those were the ones who were on one side. You had Japan and Germany and Italy on the other side. So you see, these victors, they gave themselves the powers over everybody else. So that's how come the Security Council, even after many years, it is only 15 members. They have not increased. You see, they haven't, there were times they were discussing, because maybe they've increased to about 25 and so on. But so long as these other ones have permanence, and you give another group, if you are here, you can exercise the similar power, but it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the group of countries. Say in Africa, if you are representing Africa, you can do that. If you are representing Asia, you can do that. But you see, that order has not come to be. It's not easy. What you have, you don't want to let go.
So the veto power.
Yes.
On what kind of decisions do they get to exercise their veto?
Yeah. Well, it is issues of international peace and security. That section is the one that they really control. Kabisa. But you see, they have a gap. You see, if you have France and Britain and America, you see, you have those almost of like mind. But there are times when France might not be there, and then you have these other two Anglo-Americans. You see that. And then you see there were the differences with Russia and China. Therefore, there was a gap there, so that it is not there quite. And in 1971, you see, 1949, when China itself had split from the Kai-shek regime to now the communist the part of things, and with the Kai-shek regime remaining until 1971, the Americans were able to retain the island group until that time. But fortunately, the decision was in the hands of everybody, General Assembly, not on the Security Council. There was a Chinese vote, but then they said, no, this one, it is not a question of a small part wagging and the body of the other bigger animal. So you have that kind of situation that after 1971, then this one was thrown out and this one came in. But it was a very dramatic experience, by the way, Prof. You may not know that the powers that be at the time, they really moved to make Africa and other areas not quite agree to that, but it didn't work. I remember the president of that great country there talked to African heads of state. I remember one dramatic example was Ghana, the foreign minister in New York was asked to change the vote, a vote that they had exercised for the mainland from independence. You know, Ghana became independent on March 17, 1957. And in 1971, they were told, the foreign minister in New York was asked to vote the other way. He resigned and left. Because they were being forced but to vote to sustain Taiwan in as a member of the United Nations. And that made the Ghanaian foreign minister resign. And you know, it was not only Ghana that was pushed in that kind of situation by the US. You know, in Kenya, the president there also called our president, Jomo Kenyatta, and he said, you know, please, if you can change your the normal vote. And the Jomo, you know, so I told the American well, the American president, that he has instructed his foreign minister. So, you see, that was it. He didn't do that. So Mugai, they never changed the vote. So it was a very tough one. Yes, yes. He said, I have instructed my foreign minister on this one. He did say, you instructed him in what direction. but the situation was quite clear. Kenya did not change its vote, and therefore the mainland came back now to assume its proper role in the United Nations, the Security Council, and so on and so forth. And the Chinese decided that they would look at veto differently, kind of protect also the developed country, which brought them in anyway. So you can see where we have come from in this particular period of international politics. So it's well worth appreciating this. I don't know how many of our people actually now recall this, but it so happens that some of us were in New York at the time, and doing this, and the Chinese very quickly picked up from key countries, on the row of the sea. They came to us and asked for what is the issues, what are the issues, and so on and so forth, and in several other areas. And so we updated them, so to speak. In fact, when the Chinese team came, they had already, they were speaking Kiswahili. Yes, they had learned it in Zanzibar and so on, and Tanzania. So they were kind of ready to communicate with everybody else down the line. You see, at one time the ambassador was quite alert to the fact that was I getting closer to the Chinese or what? But it's a question. You teach the people what you know and the issues, and you spell it out, and they take it for themselves so that they can fit faster. But that was the nature of that kind. And then, of course, thereafter, you see the Africa itself, the decolonization came well, and at the moment you have the 55 African states. Fortunately, the African countries and the Asian countries, they quickly set themselves up as a non-aligned group. So they had a forum of their own to consider. We will not automatically support the US or the UK or French and so on. You look at your issues and say, this is our position, as opposed to, and you will automatically falling with this or with the other and so on. So you will be, they call it positive non-alignment. Yeah, so that you will not be taken for granted automatically by the Eastern European Russians or by whoever. No, we look at an issue and they will decide on its own merit, so to speak. And that is what really saved us. So with an Organization of African Unity, you have a position. We are going in this direction. By the time you are going you are in New York, you are in on a political issue, you have decided this is it. Or you may have an occasional one country which has been given aid or defense, other equipment and so on, and therefore they will either be abstain or absent themselves, and this kind of thing in the vote. But by and large, the non-alignment, which is currently, as you know, chaired by the president of Uganda, you can see is still holding. because of that kind of aspects where you might have been given aid here and you are kind of twisted. If you don't do that, there will be this consequence. So they shout timber or something, and people know, hey, these people will not immediately do that, and they will be joined by others and so on.
Just out of curiosity.
Yes.
So I wanted you to explain the difference between non-alignment.
Yes.
The group of 77.
Yes.
And the South Commission.
Yes.
And you can link it up with probably, I don't know whether the BRICS comes in, but maybe not.
Yeah.
But these three, what is the main difference?
Yeah, you see the group of 77, they were now looking more at the economic side. The political side was picked by the non-aligned group. But you see the economics, where you are now in ECOSOC, UNCTAD, and so UNCTAD also came in, so that they look at these things. Our interests are broadly here. So that's how the group of 77 then featured this way. The political non-alignment, and you saw Yugoslavia of the day, they were within the non-aligned group. They were not completely with the Soviets. The Soviet group and so on. Later on you found Romania also kind of easing off over the other side, leaving Poland to begin with, and so on and so forth. So those are the kind of political groupings that you saw. The Asians also came up to look at themselves with a little bit of distance from Japan and so on, and then because the harmony between Japan and China is also like this, so that you found the former Commonwealth countries like India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and so on. They are also more on these sides. So it's pragmatism, so to speak, but not definitely automatic or automaticity at all. You know, in 1972, because the work was done in 1972. You see, 1972 was a critical year for Kenya. You see, they wanted to replace the country that had left, and then our neighbor was there the years immediately before. It was interesting that the Burundi, and I mentioned this here, if you remember, Prof. Burundi, Nabwera, and Oderojo were classmates in Maseno. And Burundi, Nabwera, for the U.S., by the way, it was, U.S. did not allow for an ambassador in Washington to also be ambassador in New York. But Burundi was an exception. So that by the time Burundi left, Kibige was ambassador to Washington, but was not ambassador to New York. You see, U.S. is a big country and big power, and so you cannot really split the kind of functions you want. You want to do this. Kibige as ambassador to Washington would come, would occasionally be in a delegation, to the UN as one of the delegates and so on. Kenya could also bring an ambassador from Europe to join a delegation and so on. But essentially, the US separated those two roles. And you have U.S. and Russia, for example, having the the ambassador, American ambassador to New York is also sits in a cabinet on his side, so that he has full scope of appreciation of how the government is functioning. Equally, the Russian ambassador in my days there, I don't know what is the structure is at the moment, but the Russian ambassador had the rank of deputy foreign minister in New York. You see how seriously they take this. If you have a deputy foreign minister as the ambassador to
Serious.
yes, so it's a very serious type performance.
So now lead us
Yeah.
to the UN Security Council and how he got in, the politics prior to getting in, and how he got in.
Well, I think it is the state, it is the status with the very high respect Africa held for Jomo Kenyatta and the country, how it fought its way to independence from the British. That, I think, made the day. There was no question. And you can see it came in without any fuss or difficulty. And as our own president did not go his word, he was very highly respected. He spoke out there in Nairobi. The message got to these other capitals very easily. And then, of course, if you look at the foreign ministers that Kenya had, from the word go, people like, Murumbi as Minister of State. Then you had Njoroge Mungai, who was the president's doctor, foreign minister. You see, he has the health of the president and health of the nation. So you can see the strong connections. You had the Minister of State before Dr. Mugai took over the Foreign Office, Bio Koinange, who was previously Pan-African Minister, but then became Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. And you know he was the key man of the President, Jomo Kenyatta. Yeah, and also a brother-in-law. Equally important for Kenya in 1972 was that Kenya wanting to have an organization in Nairobi. The two decisions were taken in the same year. For UNEP, down the side, and for Security Council. And that, in the Security Council, it also shapes the relationship with the member states all over the place. You see, there are issues that came up in the Security Council every 6 months. For example, you had issues between Greece and Turkey for Cyprus. You see, immediately those two countries were protagonists. With Kenya coming into the Security Council, they would also not be opposed to when we were dealing with the UNEP matters, because you are seeing this, they are coming in, and these issues will be considered every 6 months. No, be careful. and so you can see political issues entangled with some of these other issues, and you had to think twice before you act in a different way. Yes. Even South Africa did not oppose Nairobi for the secretariat, by the way, or Portugal for that matter. You see? So it was a very interesting development for Kenya for the year 1972.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So in this secretariat, in environment, a strong power, and in a Security Council, the following the year 73, 74.
Okay.
So you can see that.
Yeah. So what role did you play in lobbying for Kenya to become a member of the UN Security Council?
I think the weight of Nairobi, the Foreign Office, and the President and the Foreign Minister was absolutely clear and decisive, and Kenya was itself highly respected in East Africa. You see, you had Nyerere, you had Obote. You had Kaunda coming in later, and so on, and the other friend of the Jomo Kenyatta, president of Malawi, Nyasaland, scored before. So these were together in London and so on. There are those friendships and so on. And of course you had Kwame Nkrumah also, working with the people. Kenyans in the colonial time, people like Bioko Inange were in Ghana. So the mesh, they looked at what is happening there to kind of do that. You see, and MVU would then be the Pan-African minister, having, so to speak, picked a leaf or two from the Kwame Nkrumah area. Yeah.
Now, initially, you said that America was initially opposed to the unit being located here.
Yes.
Although they changed their position.
Yes.
Would you say that they were pushing for Kenya to become a member of the UN Security Council, or were they opposed?
No, they didn't oppose at all. Yeah, Kenya was quite Kenya and America were friendly. And they sent a gentleman they side who was active, a journalist. You remember him, William Atwood. Who quickly wrote a book, The Reds and the Blacks. Yes, and so on, comparing Guinea situation of Guinea vis-a-vis France and Kenya and the UK and so on. Yeah, and Kenya, you see the Kennedy era was very positive with the Boya and those flights and so on.
So we could say that the US was not opposed.
No, and you see quickly they wrote, William Rogers, Secretary of State, wrote to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, says they are not going to protest or to persist. You see, US would have preferred that if the Secretariat was not in Europe, it would be a part of New York. But of course, that once a decision that we made is in a developing country, yeah, it can't be, because if you use the old principle that everything else will be where everything else is, because you see, FAO was in Rome, right? Paris had UNESCO. Yeah. Geneva had the ITU, International Telecommunications Union, had the Regional Commission for Europe, had the WIPO, had WMO, WHO. Britain had the IMO or IMCO. So you see what it is. If you argue then that everything be where everything is, then what about all these vacuum from South America all the way to Australia? How can you claim that the global organization is global if it is that segment from the Mediterranean up going to Atlantic there, Canada and the US? Right? Yeah. So you can see quite clearly there was a serious gap.
You have been to all these cities where the UN has a headquarters.
Yes.
New York,
yes.
Geneva,
yes.
London.
Yes, and Montreal, Canada. ICAO.
Yeah.
Yes.
At least I'm familiar with the one in New York, the UN headquarters in New York.
Yes.
It's quite an imposing building.
Yes.
But if you compare that with what we have, the UN here in Kenya, it doesn't quite compare, or it pales in comparison. So is it that the UN does not give this particular facility enough money to be able to build a huge, humongous, imposing facility, or what's going on?
Well, it's an approach that is different. There, in some of these places in New York, it goes up. Here we are horizontal. It is, we were able to offer area, and we had it. and we have expanded it. So you have a different look. It's an environment. Environment doesn't just go this way. Environment is opportunity to do this. And look at the consequence of this area. You know, there was never Ruda. There was not what, all those areas and so on. So we have catalyzed our type of environment for the appropriate. You have the forest there, just next door. And within Nairobi city, not too far away, in the same city, you have a national park. They don't have it in New York. They have a zoo. So it's what was brought here was to enhance our own environment and move on. So you have an example that you see we could go this way, but it would completely lose shape. You see the construction there was paid for by the UN and the regular budget and the contributions of governments, not Kenya per se. Kenya made a contribution of the land. So we gave what we had, and we beat Britain, which was already saying there is a building in London. we overcame.
Yes.
Yeah, we came with open arms and understanding. That's how I would look at it, rather than seeing this one going up, because those were limited anyway. Yeah, they remember the UN was the conclusion of the UN conference to set up a place. There was in the California area, over on the other side of the Pacific, and said they decided to then settle it in the Eastern Seaboard. That was the politics of the time. And you see, New York was also close. You see, vis-a-vis Canada, the two states that constitute a subcontinent. You see, it was close. You see, ICAO in Montreal, and an hour and a half to New York, and so on. So they were settling this way in that particular manner. But here, you know, we gave the space. I began by pointing out to you that we showed the UN team opposite where the National Youth Service is, from Utalii across. We actually showed that area. We then showed this Gigiri. We showed the Upper Hill. We showed, even from the airport, so we can, we might get something and, narrow, cut down a little bit of the park and so on. But the people chose the coffee plantation and so on. But you see the dramatic development of that area all the way now to Kiambu and so on. Yes. You can see it's a bonus for development and the expansion of the city. You see the way that the UN set in America and so on and so forth. You are talking. Don't forget, you have the key countries which you are deciding on these things. You have America probably offering that to do that. Then you have America understands very well with Canada, with Britain. Then the other Western power is France, right? Spain and Portugal were down, and France were already in the Caribbean and in the South America. So the consideration were not these ones, these were appendages Africa. Because when you saw Britain in half Africa, France in half Africa, Belgium with the Congo and the Rwanda, Burundi there, and then you see the victors lost, Cameroon and Namibia and so on, that's Germany and so on. Italy lost. France over the other side. So the consideration was that, if you, France from Paris, with Africa, it's French. It is an appendage of the other one. You don't consider this. And there was no consideration that which way they would go. In fact, you see the French, the German territories were divided between the British, between and France. So you see, don't look at it from the perspective of today. Because if you do it that way, then you see the world was not made with that in view. It was that Britain, so it's African, it's going to India and so on. You see, France, down. So if France has it, part of Africa had it. If Britain has it, then it had the other one. So the consideration was not you will go to this. You see, at this point in time, Africa is not going north, is looking this way. So we have Indian Ocean, Nairobi, Kenya, Tanzania, and Somalia, all the way now toward the Atlantic. So we don't have to go through the Cape to come this. We can actually create a rail system, roads from Cameroon coming this way. You can do another road from Addis Ababa and you can go across the continent. Previously, at the time we are talking about, that you are raising the issue on, it was, Kenya and South Africa and so on went this way. The
Great Northern.
Yes. Do you see the way we are going? Yeah. You see? So now the question is, India, they had traditional ties anyway across that way. But you can see we have changed the physical approach and also the politics, by the way. Because you see, if you look at the relations between the French-speaking part of Africa and so on, they are now coming to Nairobi and to Tanzania and to whatever, and we are going those sides. So you see, don't compare what was and what has come to pass.
Good.
Because we are now making it better for ourselves.
There has been an attempt to reform the UN to accommodate more members in the UN Security Council. Probably to even remove the veto or distribute it more equitably. So can you update us on those efforts? I know you're a keen observer. So what has been going on?
I don't think it is actively on now, the question of reforms of the UN. Because if you look at the differences between the big powers, you see it would be a non-starter. In the sense that, you see, if you propose an amendment, it has to go to that, including these permanent fellows. So it is really, it would require consensus that has been worked out very cautiously and carefully and patiently. And the mood actually is not there. If you look at the situation Palestine, Hamas, and so on, you can see. You see, there is no question. You see, the General Assembly passes a resolution by a huge margin, and it's a resolution, a good resolution. But it is not going to be implemented because the responsibility of international peace and security, including in that section, has to have consensus from the members in the Security Council.
So are the non-Security Council members happy with this arrangement?
Which one?
The arrangement that they can pass a resolution
in
the UN, which is going to be vetoed. Well, even if it's a good resolution.
But you see that already. The general, it does, that happens, is the reality of life, because you have interest. You see you have one or two of the powers strongly supporting the other side, and you see you have to see what would be the common ground. That's the bottom line. Yeah, because you have it. That is the issue. When ultimately there is an understanding that we can restructure and maybe tone down on the 5, because the years between 45 to date and so on, now we can restructure somewhat, maybe have regional groupings and so on, and so more working together. You see, that has to be, you need change in leadership in these countries for them to see that it would be beneficial. But before then, you have to do with what is best for the moment. Yeah, much as the one doesn't like it. Yeah, because you see, it's the Security Council. If it was like a third of the membership, it would make, you see, you're able to have a broader view. Now it is overshadowed by you see, it's 10 non-permanent members and 5. So you see, what are you comparing with, you see? These are already seated on the chair to decide we can go or cannot go. But if you had, say, 30 or 40 for that matter in the council, you might be able to say, let us agree on the minimum so that we can then go and consult this other bigger body. But if already it is known that between 2 or 3, no. It's a non-starter. If you look at Israel and Hamas, what we say Hamas is not really an entity that ought to be on the table with anything called states. So you can see these are a group from the Arab side trying to prevail on these and so on, and you see there is no table you can say let's get who, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and who from that group who would you listen to? You see, that's Palestine itself. Even so to speak, agree. Yeah, is it related to the Hamas in some way, or what? You see, it's a very. It's not typically what you would say. You see, with the states go, let us meet, let's do this. This is our agenda. Okay. But you see, these other protagonists, they even starting is an issue. Who are they talking to? Yes, very. As you know, we have. Well, I think it is. You see, this book is overseeing the issues of what we would call international peace and security. That is the broad framework of action for the council that is responsible for that area. Now, thereafter, within that context, you then have to look at the globe as is tackling issues within that context. So if you look at here, you are looking at you have the Middle East. As it was there in the 70s and before. As you know, the 1948, that is when Israel was kind of created and this other opposing side, and then the sympathy of the neighbors to the north, Lebanon, the neighboring of Saudi Arabia, and Yemen and all these other on the side. But the problem, the simmering issues are not gone. That's how come today we are talking of 7 October last year. And, dragging on. So the Middle East is still an issue. There were other issues that, and you can see, if you look at this, Middle East and Middle East issues of the Middle East, the oil diplomacy in 73 and so on. When the oil would automatically be exploited by the North. But now these people came and said it's ours. And it was theirs. Once they are independent, they are not subject to London or to Paris and so on. So you see that. If you look at it, still the oil is an issue. It's not died, and it won't die anyway. Then you go further and you look at it in our own other regions. You had the issues of Panama, America, and so on. What? You remember that there was an issue between some Caribbean states, Cuba, and the U.S. It's not active at the moment, but there are still, you can point a finger here and there and so on. So it is it rose back, and when you come to Africa, we had our colonial issues, which have kind of simmered, and the 1948 apartheid regime for that particular period. So Africa itself, you see, which was on top of the issues, Southern Rhodesia, and Namibia, South Africa, you see, they are not no longer in issues. Now it is the tribal issues that are figuring out here and there, and Security Council would warn, let's African Union, why don't you take it up and come with solutions which are typical of your own particular region. So you see the issues that are there in the 70s. They have kind of mellowed in, so to speak. You see, if you look at Asia, there are not, you see, except for the Afghanistan situation that had been there, and a bit of, you see, Soviet Union broke down, and you have Russian, whatever, the other one is cool, the Russian republics that used to be there with an issue. So you see, you can see it goes like this, up and down and so on. But the Middle East has been consistently the issue that is still on the table, was on the table, and had been on the table from 1948. You have to have a full background to appreciate where they have come in, where they are, and where they still have to go. You just don't come in and you say in 2070, Kenya is in the Security Council now, and there is this gap. You ask, where are you coming from? You need to be aware, and the diplomacy, the history, everything else has to have context. Yeah, you don't just come and then begin there. You do have having no idea. Yeah, because if you bring a diplomat, a young diplomat now, who is 25 or 30, and all that he understands there is a charter, but how come these things just happen and so on and so forth? You see, you need to be patient, understand the basis, the background, and everything else. And we played some role to get things going. And we have been, Africa has been beneficiaries of these particular processes. Yes. So we have to protect that. and be thankful that we were articulate and alert. And now are respected. Yes. Yeah. You see the languages. You find the language of the victors at the UN: Chinese, French, Spanish, English, Russian, and Chinese. Look at this. And then we added Arabic now. I'm sure there will be pressure to get Kiswahili, which is an African language, widespread and so on. But up to now, we had only the language of the victors. Only one more language was added, Arabic. There is no German. There is no Italian. There is no Japanese. Those were conquered.
Having participated in some of these major decisions,
yes,
and wins for Kenya,
yes,
what would you advise the young diplomats, those who are joining the foreign service, those who are negotiating on our behalf?
Yes, yes.
What kind of advice would you give?
You see, they have to be broad-minded. They have to know with whom they are negotiating. Consequently, our own problems, analyze what we consider to be our problems here. In relation to whom? To Asia, to Europe, to America, to Latin America. What is the common ground? In other words, somebody who goes into the Foreign Office unaware of the issues of neighbors and region and the adjoining region and so on, they must work hard so that when you go to, if you're posted to Pakistan or posted to India, you have to also look at where is India, Pakistan, and so on coming from. So that if you are talking to a diplomat on the other side, you don't ask what is something that amazes the other side. Where is this one coming from? How come? So these young diplomats must be articulate, must be broadly read, must be, must listen, must check on the other side and so on, so that you are at home with the full background of a people. In other words, they need not to do less, but to do more, grossly more. Yeah. You see, I mentioned to you at the beginning, when I went to read law, I didn't just do reading these other things that are going to make me a local person, assistant chief, and so on, an MP for a limited constituency. You see, we in our time, we went throughout the country. I went to Mombasa first time in 1961. I was in Form 2. I was not comfortable that I don't know the coast, the oceans, and so on. I drove all the way to Kisumu, those sites. In other words, you begin by knowing your country. If you have somebody born in Moranga, has not been to Meru or Ebu next door. What? Yeah, Kitui, they don't know the way. Come on. How are you then going to deal with foreign affairs of a country without whatever? Now, people who are saying, let's make them local. When did you know your country and your people? You see, I was with in 1960 when I entered Alliance, that the number of tribes that were represented in the school were 28. At this point in time in Alliance, all tribes are represented. That's how you know them. I was chairman of Intertribal Society. listening to other songs and so on of the other people and so on, and learning from them. You need that. And then once you appreciate your own country, you are aware of next door neighbor, Tanzania and Uganda and South Sudan and Ethiopia, yeah, and Somalia. Yes, where I went in a heads of state meeting in July 1974. See, where I was in Ghana in 1970. I was in, Gambia, I was in Cote d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, Dahomey, and you're talking. Then you are ready. If it is foreign service, learn languages, understand them, but also begin with your neighbor's language so that you do. I can understand a little bit of Luo here and this kind of stuff. So it is intense preparation, intense knowledge and friendship of these other younger people that you will build the country together.
As you're working for the UN, what is your assessment of the import of Pan-Africanism? Does it have an impact? Is it some worth for the African countries to pursue, or what is it?
Yes, Africa must understand itself. We were confused with the languages of others and so on. And we must now make sure we are talking and we are understanding each other. That is the duty of everything else that we do. And Nairobi, by having UN here, is an opportunity for people to be able to relate globally. It's been brought here. It's an advantage, immense advantage. In my youthful days, I looked forward to going to Ghana. I liked the efforts and endeavors of Kwame Nkrumah. And I asked God to help me that when I move out of East Africa, I should first go to Ghana. I went there first time in January 1970 and was in Ghana thereafter every year for the next 10 years or more. So as I then was a deputy regional representative for Africa, I went to all those countries. As I was doing environmental law and so on, I gave an opportunity to, so I was in Mozambique, and I would be brief Portuguese as an expert to help those people do in the languages there and so on, giving a framework of what is happening in Tanzania, in Malawi and so on, where I help them make their laws and so on. And these other places, sent people to Zambia, I sent people, went to Nigeria, I trained the people here and there and so on. I went to Equatorial Guinea and all these places. So in a way, it's a question of building togetherness, understanding. Yes, I got found in environmental law some people from Europe going to a place like small place like Gambia, and they give a draft legislation to Gambia, which is a copy of a draft from Germany or some others. I said no. I went there and I said no, we'll do it differently.
Tell us why environmental law is important.
You see, you are dealing with nature and order within the natural world, and organize it in a manner to be beneficial, not to be destroyed and so on. Organize it so that there is order everywhere. That was not there. You can see even in other situations that people are not consulting one another. They say, this is mine. It is not yours. Move move together agriculture and the outcome and so on, and natural resources here and there, and the animals and the people interaction of these kind of factors. That is how come we had only environmental law, Environmental Law and Coordination Act in 1999 in Kenya. To my embarrassment, when I was there as the head of legal developments in the environment, Kenya came in on 1999. Uganda was before Kenya in 1995. Tanzania was ahead in 1983. It did the Zanzibar one with FAO and so on. We were in Ghana much earlier, and Nigeria, and Gambia. I was in Lesotho.
So what delayed Kenya's?
Well, as you know, it's the usual, it's the typical politics and so on. People that are dithering here and there. Yeah, and it is not until Ambassador Ogeri was appointed there, and I told the ambassador, how come you don't move in the direction to have coordinated approach here and so on in law? He said, can we do something? I said, yes, write to the executive director to say Kenya needs assistance in this area. And that is when, when it was done, I told the ambassador it will land on my desk. I got Professor Okidi, who was teaching at Moi University, a gentleman I met in New York in February 1971, on his way to Fletcher School in Boston. Said, let's help our country. Now, before I was asked later on by the Chief Justice of the day, my classmate, Chief Justice Gichero and Attorney General Marco, can you help? And so on, we helped. I said, can you operationalize the act? And I went in as chairman of the National Environment Tribunal. And we did it, and now this is operational and so on. We put together the Environmental Land Court. Now it's thriving and so on, at 50-something judges. But you see, we have to do something to make a difference even from where we are. So, yes, we brought about declarations, guidelines, principles, treaties. I showed you that one, which I launched in Accra, Ghana, for Asia and Africa. All those interest to those two regions, and then we put together for the Pacific, Southeast Asia, Latin America. So we moved from this situation to the global situation.
So in terms of scholarship,
yes.
Do you feel like environmental law is given the emphasis it requires in our institutions?
Now there is no question. You have a whole full superior court on these issues, and it's doing well. We have a string of treaties, and Kenya is a leader in that one. If you look at the series of treaties that they have put across, is there. They have environmental diplomacy well established, and the people have. You see, even I have contributed a little bit, as you have seen. Yes. So we are fully there as a leader in this area. You know that one. It marks between 1970 and 2022. So you see the challenge is that we are there. Yes, we are there. And I went to Asia, we did the same. Yes, and so I went to Vietnam, we put the Vietnam legislation. Besides my professional in diplomacy and law, and in that, I have been in education as a volunteer. Not paid there, not accepted in a seating allowance or anything. Yeah, so I've been at my school, Alliance High School. I've been the longest chairman of the board, I was in the board and altogether some 34 years. I was chairman of the PTA for another 11 years. I was head of the school Old Boys Association in bursaries and so on. My kids went to Alliance Girls, and I have been there for the past 39 years, and they still want me to not give them up and so on. So, doing what I can.
Yes.
I was chairman at a Catholic school in Nyeri. I was chairman for 19 years. It's called Ave Cody. I wrote a map and so on. I've been in Nyandarua in education. I was able to encourage people. You see, from Alliance High School, I noticed that we hadn't done as much as we did. I looked at the first 1,000 students, and in that way, 1926 to roughly 1950s, 60s, the amount of literature that has come out is not much. It's only Duncan Degwa, who has done 5, 6 or more books. Others is here and there and so on. And so I decided I cannot be complaining that people don't write, so I had to do mine. You see, and others are doing the same. So you can see I have encouraged this kind of thing so that at least one should be able to write their story. And you see, even the French asked me if I can do my story at something, and I did on UNEP aspects.